Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little more immersive than usual, because you're about to be transported, body and soul, into the grimy, wheezing, sheep-scented world of medieval life. There's no time to pack, no safety net, and definitely no indoor plumbing. You're not arriving as a lord or lady, oh no. You're stepping straight into the worn leather shoes of a commoner. A serf, to be precise. Your job? Survive. And spoiler alert, you probably won't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins with the scent. Not the kind of rustic, charming aroma you might imagine from a Renaissance fair. This is medieval stank, raw and unfiltered. Manure, smoke, sweat, and an unsettling whiff of something recently deceased. That's your first breath as you trudge up the dirt road into the village. Chickens scatter, a mangy dog eyes you suspiciously, and a barefoot child points and laughs because you're new, and probably overdressed in your modern imagination. Ahead, the village gate isn't so much a structure as it is two leaning posts with a rope strung between them. A decorative boundary. But cross it, and you're inside the fiefdom. The very air feels heavier here, thick with obligation. The sun glares down, and you're already regretting your choices. You don't get welcomed. The locals eye you like you might be carrying the plague, which, to be fair, is a legitimate concern in this era. A bent-backed woman shuffles past carrying a bucket of something suspiciously chunky, and no one offers to tell you where to go. You stand awkwardly near a pile of straw until a leathery man with 3 teeth points toward a crumbling hut and grunts something that might be yours. Inside, the hovel is smaller than your bathroom back home. The floor is dirt. The walls are wattle and daub, basically woven sticks smothered in a delightful mix of mud and manure. There's no insulation, no windows, and a single hole in the roof for smoke to escape. Unless the wind is feeling frisky, in which case it's also your indoor rain feature. Your bed? Huh? That's rich. It's a wooden frame, if you're lucky, with a straw mattress that crackles under your weight. You immediately discover a thriving community of fleas. They are not impressed with your presence, but they are very interested in your ankles. A sack of onions hangs from the rafters, swinging gently like a sad medieval air freshener. There's a small hearth where a fire may or may not have been extinguished a week ago. The smell says yes, but the cold ash says no. Either way, you'll be sleeping in your clothes tonight. Not because it's stylish, but because there's no alternative. Blankets are for the rich. You get what you're wearing and whatever warmth you can siphon from the goat curled in the corner. Oh yes, there's a goat. You share your living space with livestock. That's not unusual. In fact, in some homes, the animals are the warmest, cleanest, and most polite roommates. The downside? They chew everything. Including your shoes, your bed, and occasionally your dignity. Outside, the village pulses with its own odd rhythm. Bells chime from the distant church. Smoke curls from thatched roofs. Children dart through the mud, flinging pig bladders and chasing geese. It's lively, in the way a wasp's nest is lively. You'll fit in eventually. Maybe. For now, you shuffle through the village, trying not to fall into the open sewage trench that snakes along the main road. That's right, there are no toilets. Waste goes wherever gravity takes it. If you're fancy, you yell "Gardiloo" before dumping your chamber pot. If not, well, let's just say no one stands near the windows. You pass the blacksmith's forge, where sparks fly and the air smells metallic and angry. The smith doesn't look up. He's too busy shaping a horseshoe or possibly inventing tetanus. Across the way, the baker pulls burnt loaves from a communal oven. The smell is oddly comforting, until you realize he's baking the same bread every day, coarse, dense, and capable of doubling as a doorstop. Down the road, a one-legged man sits by a stump, carving spoons with the same knife he uses for everything. He nods at you with the universal look of "you'll get used to it, or die." A few paces beyond, someone is shouting about a pig that escaped the pen and now owes taxes. Yes, even livestock can be financially liable in this timeline. The church looms at the edge of the village, towering over everything like a holy scarecrow. Its stone walls are cold and solemn. Inside, a monk is singing something in Latin, which sounds beautiful until you realize it's a prayer for the souls of plague victims. The graveyard out back is disturbingly full, and one grave looks suspiciously fresh. You step back. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant was truly as downtrodden as modern media suggests. Some records show tight-knit communities and lively festivals. Others, however, read more like survival horror diaries. And while you might stumble into a friendly feast or a maypole dance, you're far more likely to step into a pothole full of something unmentionable. You're welcome to the medieval villages, memorable. No balloons, no streamers. Just hard earth, hard bread, and harder stairs. But you're here now. And if you want to survive, you'd better start figuring out how this strange, itchy, plague-adjacent world works. Morning breaks in the medieval village not with a peaceful sunrise but with the shrill scream of a rooster who sounds like he's in the middle of a breakdown. You jolt awake, tangled in your straw-stuffed bedding, limbs itchy and stiff, already regretting every modern comfort you ever took for granted. There's no alarm clock, just the livestock chorus and the smell of wet wool and regret. You sit up, bump your head on a low beam, and dislodge a handful of straw from your tunic. Welcome to day one of surviving the medieval world. You peel yourself from the makeshift bed and realize you've developed a deep relationship with your flea colony overnight. They are thriving, and they've named you Dave. The first challenge? Washing up. You step outside your hut into the crisp dawn air, which smells like manure, smoke, and dew-soaked mildew. There's a communal water barrel in the center of the village, and by communal, I mean every person, pig, and pigeon has probably had a sip. You splash some on your face. It's cold. It's possibly alive. It counts as a bath. There are no toothbrushes. That luxury's a few hundred years away. Instead, you rub your teeth with a twig, preferably one from a sweet-smelling plant like sage or rosemary. If you're lucky, the local wise woman might suggest charcoal powder or crushed oyster shells for added abrasion. Whether that helps or just gives you an early ticket to the Toothless Hall of Fame is still up for debate. Medieval dental hygiene is a bit like gambling with your gums. Spoiler, you lose. You step back into your one-room palace and begin dressing, or rather, continue wearing what you slept in. Your outfit today is a scratchy woolen tunic dyed in earth tones, which is a fancy way of saying mud-colored. Beneath that, you have linen undergarments. Or you would, if you'd had time to steal some from the clothesline. Socks? No. Instead, rough foot wrappings, if anything, and leather shoes that resemble roasted squirrels. There's no wardrobe. Clothes are too precious. You own one outfit, maybe two if you're absurdly lucky or have recently looted someone more stylish. Washing clothes means soaking them in cold water, scrubbing them with lye soap that can strip paint, and beating them against rocks. So it happens, rarely. You don't wash clothes to get them clean. You wash them when they physically protest. Outside, you mingle with your fellow villagers. The smell is a blend of body odor, fermented turnips, and despair. But everyone's used to it. In fact, smelling too good might get you accused of witchcraft. Cleanliness is suspicious. Dirt equals virtue. The local priest even says so in Sunday sermons. You walk toward the fields, where the morning shift is already breaking their backs for the glory of the local lord. You're not a guest here. You're a serf, a peasant bound to this land like moss to a stone. You owe your labor to the manor in exchange for not being actively hunted by soldiers or wolves. Most of the year, that means tending fields, repairing fences, or harvesting turnips like your life depends on it. Because it does. Today, you're handed a wooden hoe and pointed at a muddy patch the size of a tennis court. Your job? Weeding. All day. Kneeling in damp earth, pulling up roots, and swatting flies that may or may not be carrying the next pandemic. Your knees scream. Your back locks up by R2. A beetle crawls up your sleeve, gives you a look, and moves on. You don't blame it. Lunch is brought in a communal pot, barley porridge with chunks of something formerly vegetable. You scoop it out with a wooden spoon so splintered it might count as a dual-purpose toothpick. You eat sitting on a stone, watching the birds who are judging your posture. It's not glamorous. But it fills you, sort of. And it's warm, which is more than you can say for your fingers. As you gnaw your porridge and consider whether your foot might be permanently numb, the reeve, sort of a medieval middle manager, rides by on a tired-looking donkey. He yells about rents, tithes, and upcoming feasts. You nod, trying to look engaged. You have no idea what he said, but agreeing is safer than asking questions. Remember, literacy is rare, especially among serfs. Most information is passed orally, and no one has time to explain things twice. Back in the village by sunset, you realize your entire body has achieved crispy bacon status. Your muscles scream. Your feet smell like betrayal. And you've developed a rash you don't remember earning. Congratulations, you've survived a full medieval workday. There's no shower, no ergonomic chair, and no oat milk latte waiting. Instead, dinner is a repeat performance of barley and a chunk of dark bread so dense you could use it as a weapon. You chew slowly, staring at the fire pit, thinking about how Netflix never asks you to harvest turnips or wash in raccoon water. The village prepares for bed around nightfall. There's no electricity. Candles are expensive. You follow suit, curling up in your straw mattress and whispering a prayer that the roof holds through the night. Outside, an owl hoots. A wolf howls. Something snuffles past your door. You ignore it all and close your eyes. Historians still argue whether peasants experienced satisfaction in their lives, given the simplicity and community bonds. Some even claim it was less stressful than modern living. Those historians, I assume, have never tried weeding by hand with 13th century blisters or shared a mattress with a goat named Doris. Sleep, medieval peasant. Tomorrow promises more mud, mystery meat, and maybe a visit from the tax collector. If you survive the night, that is. You wake up with your mouth dry, your limbs stiff, and a persistent tickle on your cheek. Turns out it's not a dream, it's just one of your flea tenants doing laps. Morning in medieval life doesn't begin with a gentle stretch and birdsong. No, it starts with a donkey braying like it's possessed and a pot being banged loudly outside your door. Breakfast time. Which sounds more exciting than it is. Today's meal is, surprise, barley. Again. This time in the form of a lukewarm, greyish gruel. No sugar, no honey, just water, grain, and a pinch of disappointment. You slurp it down from a wooden bowl that still smells like yesterday's dinner. If you're lucky, there's a crust of bread to mop it up, provided it hasn't been nibbled by rats during the night. Pro tip, always check for tooth marks. Unless you enjoy surprises of the rodent variety. You shuffle outside, your woolen tunic clinging to you in all the wrong places. There's a fine mist in the air, which soaks your clothing without ever fully committing to becoming rain. The ground squelches. You step in something that definitely wasn't just mud, and someone's already yelling about a missing chicken. Classic Tuesday. Today you're tasked with delivering firewood to the manor house. That's the big, slightly less depressing stone building at the top of the hill. You hoist a bundle onto your back, thicker than you are, and begin the slow, muddy trudge up. The path winds through animal pens, past the alewife's shack, where you briefly consider bribing her for a morning pint, and over a small wooden bridge that creaks ominously beneath your weight. You make a mental note to fall somewhere more scenic if the planks give out. The manor itself looms like a castle that ran out of ambition halfway through. A wooden palisade surrounds it. Guards in mismatched armor eye you suspiciously as you approach. You're not a threat, you're a firewood donkey in a human costume. But paranoia is part of their job description. You dump the logs near the kitchen door and are rewarded with nothing. Not even a nod. But you do smell something interesting, roasted meat. Not stew. Not gruel. Actual meat. Your stomach stages a protest. You briefly consider stealing a bone. Then you remember what happened to the last guy who tried. Let's just say his nickname is Three Fingers now. Back in the village, you're feeling bold, so you ask an elder about your rights. Big mistake. He laughs so hard he wheezes, then tells you the only rights you have involve not being executed without trial, which isn't as comforting as it sounds. You're not a citizen. Your property. Your lord owns the land, the crops, the animals, and in many ways, you. But don't worry, there's always hope. Maybe if you work hard, you'll be rewarded. Maybe you'll be allowed to keep a portion of your barley crop this year. Maybe you won't get fined for borrowing a bucket. And maybe that pig will finally stop stealing your shoes. That evening, there's a bit of a buzz in the village square. A traveling peddler has arrived with a cart full of trinkets, pins, beads, and a knife so dull it could only be used to insult someone emotionally. The children swarm him. The adults haggle. One woman trades 3 eggs for a thimble that might actually be a brass button. Everyone's excited. You chat with the peddler, who smells like onions and poor decisions. He tells you about a nearby village where a man supposedly grew a tomato the size of a child's head. You nod sagely, pretending you know what a tomato is. He also claims to have seen a wizard. You smile politely. This is entertainment in a world without screens, lies served with flair. Night falls quickly. Candles flicker inside huts. Smoke rises in thin, wheezy curls. You return to your own hovel, where someone has rearranged your straw bedding and the goat is now sleeping exactly where your legs should go. You negotiate with her. She wins. As you lie there, scratchy blanket pulled up to your chin, you realize that your life revolves entirely around survival. Food, fire, shelter. That's it. There's no leisure time. No hobbies beyond not dying. And yet, there's a strange rhythm to it. A weird peace that comes from having no choices to make. You work. You eat. You sleep. Repeat. Historians still argue whether serfs felt truly oppressed or simply accepted their place in the world. Some scholars believe that the communal nature of village life offered comfort and purpose. Others say that surviving under the constant shadow of starvation, disease, and arbitrary punishment wasn't exactly soul-nourishing. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow brings more of the same. But hey, you made it through another day without being fined, flogged, or forcibly married. That's a win. And somewhere out in the dark, a chicken finally comes home, squawking in triumph. It's the little things. Dawn cracks open with all the grace of a dropped chamber pot. You stir on your itchy straw bedding, realizing that sleeping in medieval times doesn't actually recharge your energy, it just redistributes your aches. Your back feels like a fence post, your neck has adopted a permanent leftward lean, and your feet are already offended by the idea of walking. But it's time to dress for the day, which means sliding back into the medieval equivalent of a burlap sack and pretending it's fashion. Your woolen tunic, unchanged, unwashed, and now vaguely moss-scented, hangs loosely from your shoulders. Underneath, the linen shift, that trusty undergarment, is doing its best to cling to some form of cleanliness, despite its daily exposure to mud, sweat, and whatever wandered into bed last night. There's a belt, mostly for function, not style, used to hang your knife, your pouch, and any small item you might want to keep from falling into the mud. Which, here, is every surface. Outside, the village is beginning to buzz, or wheeze. People emerge from their huts looking like characters from a Renaissance painting, only with worse posture. It's market day in the nearby town, so there's a bit more hustle. That means you need to look presentable. You attempt to smooth your tunic, wipe your face with a damp cloth, which may have once been white, and stuff your hair under a coif, a linen cap that makes you look like a sad pastry. Fashion, in medieval life, is not about aesthetics. It's about survival and class signaling. You can tell a person's status at a glance, colors, fabrics, how tight or layered their clothing is. You wear undyed wool in earth tones that scream, "I'm a serf, please don't find me." Meanwhile, the local reeve, who manages the village on the Lord's behalf, struts around in a tunic dyed blue, an extravagance thanks to the use of woad. Dye is a luxury. If someone's wearing green, red, or anything with trim, they've got money. Or at least they're borrowing some style before the tax collector arrives. The women wear long dresses, also of wool or rough spun linen, sometimes layered with aprons. Headdresses range from simple veils to elaborate cones with trailing fabric, though those belong to the nobility. The common folk stick to caps, kerchiefs, or just unbrushed hair tied back with a cord that's doing its best to hang in there. There's one exception, the alewife, who brews and sells beer. She wears a stained dress, sleeves rolled high, and a look that says she hasn't slept since last harvest. She's the closest thing to a trendsetter here, purely because she controls access to alcohol and isn't afraid to curse at the priest. As you walk, your shoes, stitched leather held together by prayer, squelch in the mud. You pass the village cobbler, who's working with a foot-shaped piece of wood and a pile of questionable leather. He waves you over and offers to resole your shoes for a boiled egg. You offer him a compliment instead. He's not impressed. Now, let's address something few medieval stories mention: your smell. You do not smell great. No one does. Washing is rare. Soap is handmade, usually from animal fat and ashes, and the concept of deodorant is centuries away. You might chew on herbs to freshen your breath, but you're really just politely masking decay. Everyone smells like smoke, sweat, and fermented cabbage. It's part of the aesthetic. At the edge of the village, you see a boy wearing a tabard, a sleeveless outer garment. His has a crude version of the local lord's crest on it, stitched in contrasting wool. He's a page, possibly training to become a squire. You ask him about his uniform, and he tells you it's made of 2 pieces of his grandmother's curtain. Medieval recycling at its finest. Historians still argue whether peasants truly cared about appearances or if clothing was purely utilitarian. Some evidence, like the discovery of carefully stitched embroidery on peasant garments, suggests pride in personal presentation. Others argue that function always trumped fashion, especially when you're sharing a hut with 5 siblings and a semi-retired goat. By midday, you're sweating. Not because it's hot, but because wool has 2 moods, itchy and suffocating. There's no such thing as seasonal wardrobes. You just wear less underneath and hope the breeze doesn't introduce you to medieval indecency laws. In the afternoon, you spot the local lord's daughter riding through on horseback, surrounded by guards. Her dress is silk, her shoes actually match, and her headdress is taller than most buildings in your village. She looks down at you with polite disdain, the medieval version of getting side-eyed at a Whole Foods. Still, you're not envious. Her outfit, while fancy, looks wildly uncomfortable. Layers upon layers, stiff collars, and so many pins she probably sets off metal detectors just by existing. Nobility may look glamorous, but they pay for it with discomfort and rules. Meanwhile, you can hike up your tunic and chase a goose if you want. Fashion freedom. That evening, you sit by the hearth, trying to untangle the laces on your tunic. They fuse together from sweat, soot, and despair. A neighbor offers to help, mostly so you don't accidentally strangle yourself. And as you pull off your shoes, airing out your blistered toes and hoping the goat doesn't lick them again, you reflect on your look. Is it stylish? No. Is it breathable? Not even close. But it tells the world who you are, a survivor. A peasant with purpose. A wool-wrapped warrior in the endless battle against fleas, foot rot, and fashion faux pas. The sun hasn't even bothered to rise yet, but your day starts anyway. You're jolted awake by the combination of a rooster's war cry and something cold and damp dripping from the ceiling onto your forehead. Either the roof's leaking again, or a squirrel's expressing its opinion. You wipe it off with the hem of your tunic, which at this point is less clothing and more a diary of previous spills and stains. You stretch, yawn, and realize your mouth feels like the floor of the alehouse. Dry, fuzzy, and possibly harboring mold. In a world without toothpaste, mouthwash, or even the concept of mint flavor, dental hygiene is creative. You pick up your trusty chew stick, plucked from a nearby bush. It's essentially a twig, but with the right bark and a little elbow grease, it frays into a crude brush. The herbal flavor helps mask the breath of barley gruel and medieval regret. Some villagers use salt or charcoal rubbed directly on the teeth, which sounds impressive until you remember that dentist is just a guy with pliers and no emotional attachments. And once teeth start falling out, they're usually gone for good. Dentures exist, sure, but only if you're rich and willing to wear someone else's recycled teeth. You shudder at the thought and promise yourself to avoid anything harder than soup today. Speaking of which, breakfast. It's not glamorous. You gulp down a bowl of cold porridge that may or may not contain a weevil or two. You fish them out with minimal fuss. Protein, right? As the village stirs, you see your neighbors emerging from their homes, each sporting a unique arrangement of wild hair, tired eyes, and unbrushed beards. Hygiene, like fashion, is entirely dependent on your social class and personal threshold for discomfort. Some people wash once a week. Others, once per season. Bathing involves heating water over a fire, lugging it into a wooden tub, and trying not to fall in and drown from shock. You'd be lucky to manage that more than a few times a year. Still, there's hope. The local stream isn't frozen solid today, and you're feeling brave. You wander down with a sliver of homemade soap that smells faintly of lard and ashes. You strip off your tunic behind a bush and wade in, gasping as the icy water hits like betrayal. You scrub quickly, doing your best to remove a layer of grime without losing any toes to frostbite. Nearby, a duck watches you in judgmental silence. Cleanliness in the Middle Ages isn't about looking good, it's about not being accused of being cursed. People believe that foul smells carry disease, so you do your best to avoid smelling like a compost heap, especially during plague season. But paradoxically, some medical theories suggest that too much bathing weakens the body, opens the pores, and invites illness. So you're stuck in the middle, trying to be just clean enough to avoid the stocks, but not so clean you attract divine punishment. Back at the village, someone's boiling laundry in a cauldron outside. The steam rises, carrying the scent of damp wool and last week's sins. Washing clothes is a full-day affair, requiring ashlie, vigorous scrubbing, and drying everything on hedges. It's less spring cleaning and more laundry as battlefield. The woman doing it has forearms like tree trunks and a glare that could curdle milk. Meanwhile, the barber surgeon has set up shop in the square. His tools gleam ominously in the light: razors, shears, a hook for extracting teeth, and something that looks like a miniature rake. He's offering haircuts, bloodletting, and casual amputations. You pass on all three. But you do need a trim. You sit nervously on the stool while he slices through your tangled hair with the same knife he uses for bloodletting. He recommends a cupping session to restore your balance. You decline. He shrugs and goes back to hacking at your sideburns like they owe him money. Historians still debate whether hygiene standards in the medieval period were truly appalling or just different by necessity. Some monasteries had regular bathing routines. Some towns had public bathhouses, though those often doubled as brothels, leading to their closure by more pious city officials. The average peasant, though, lived with dirt as a fact of life. You couldn't escape it, so you learned to embrace it. By midday, you've managed to clean your face, trim your hair, and wash most of your tunic in a bucket. You lay it on a fence to dry and spend the next 2 hours in your undergarments, which earns you a few side eyes and one wolf whistle from the goat. You use the downtime to scrape under your fingernails with a stick and attempt to delouse your cap. It's a losing battle. The lice are more entrenched than your will to live. You toss the cap onto the fire. Problem solved. That evening, you huddle near the hearth, nursing a bowl of warm broth and sore muscles. Your skin smells slightly better, your hair doesn't look like a haystack, and your teeth haven't fallen out. You call that a win. Before bed, you rub some rosemary on your armpits. Folk wisdom says it keeps away evil spirits and smells like something less awful than you. You crawl into bed beside the goat, scratch at a phantom itch, and sigh. In this world, hygiene isn't about being pristine. It's about being tolerable. You don't bathe to feel refreshed. You bathe to be slightly less revolting than your neighbor. And honestly, some days, that's enough. You wake up to the sound of a rooster, again, who's somehow managed to be even louder and more judgmental than yesterday. Your joints pop like cheap fireworks as you roll out of bed, or what passes for it, and stumble toward the doorway. Today is workday number, well, you've lost count. Every day is a workday, unless you're dead or pretending to be. Outside, the village is alive with motion. Children carry buckets, women haul firewood, and men sharpen tools with grim determination. A horse sneezes near your foot and you take it as a sign, time to face whatever backbreaking chore the universe has planned for you. Your name is on the rotation list for field labor today. Excellent. That means plowing, again. You trudge out to the edge of the village where the Lord's field lies, already lined with the hunched silhouettes of your fellow peasants dragging wooden plows through mud thick enough to trap a cow. The plow itself is a medieval masterpiece of inconvenience, a heavy wooden frame with an iron tip, usually pulled by oxen, unless the oxen are sick, in which case congratulations, you're the ox. Your job is simple: guide the plow in a straight line, keep the oxen from sitting down in protest, and try not to plow your own foot. The soil is rocky, the sun is already cruel, and there's a smell in the air that can only be described as ye olde compost. Within the first hour, your shoulders ache, your hands are blistered, and a bee has lodged itself inside your sleeve. You ignore the sting. There's no time for feelings. Next up, ditch digging. Because apparently, the rain last week turned the Lord's personal pathway into a medieval slip and slide. You and 3 other peasants are given shovels, each slightly bent and potentially haunted, and sent to fix it. The ditch must be precise, says the reeve, or the water won't flow right. You don't know what that means, but you dig like your life depends on it. Because, realistically, it might. A little before noon, you get a break. Lunch arrives in the form of a communal pot, again. This time it's pottage, a thick stew of grains, vegetables, and whatever meat could be scrounged, which today means possibly turnip-flavored rat. You don't ask. You dip your hunk of stale bread into it and chew thoughtfully, trying to ignore the crunch that wasn't from a carrot. After lunch, the blacksmith grabs you. One of the village carts has lost a wheel, and he needs someone to hold it while he reattaches it with what looks like equal parts force and wishful thinking. You nod, take your position, and spend the next half hour inhaling hot metal fumes and watching him hammer with the kind of rage usually reserved for war. Just as you think your day's over, someone from the manor arrives with a request. The cesspit needs clearing. You try to run. You fail. You're handed a bucket and a long-handled scoop and pointed toward a dark, ominous hole behind the cookhouse. This, dear listener, is the noble art of gong farming. That's right, you are now the medieval version of a sanitation engineer. Which is a polite way of saying, you shovel poop for a living. The smell? Imagine every bad decision in your life, mixed with rotten cabbage, despair, and something that died under the floorboards. You scoop. You gag. You carry the buckets to the edge of the field where the contents will nourish the soil. You reflect on your life. You wonder what your ancestors would think. Then you scoop again. Historians still argue whether peasants had clearly defined job roles or simply did whatever was most urgently disgusting. Evidence points to both. Some peasants specialized, millers, bakers, smiths, but most were generalists, skilled in whatever needs doing. Today a farmer, tomorrow a thatcher, next week a rat catcher. Jack of all trades, master of not dying. Even children work. They chase birds from crops, gather firewood, carry messages, and help in the fields. There's no school. No summer vacation. Your education is in survival and knowing which mushrooms won't kill you. Though sometimes, even that's a gamble. Late afternoon brings one final task, repairing the wattle fence around the grain store. It's been knocked over by a particularly aggressive pig. You're handed a bundle of withies, flexible willow rods, and shown how to weave them between stakes. It's a bit like building a basket, but worse. Your fingers are already raw. You do your best and hope the pig isn't planning a sequel. As the sun dips low and the sky turns purple, you finally drag yourself home. Every part of your body protests. You've sweated through wool. Your hands are stained with things better left undefined. And there's still mud in places you didn't know had crevices. Dinner is the same as lunch, only colder. You sit by the hearth, legs stretched out, staring into the fire like it might hold the meaning of life. It doesn't. It just spits ash in your direction. But you've survived the day. Just barely. Your clothes are ruined. Your body aches. You smell like compost soup. But you're still breathing. And in medieval life, that's worth celebrating. Tomorrow? You might be shoeing geese, climbing trees to thatch a roof, or helping the alewife brew a questionable batch of beer. The job doesn't matter. What matters is showing up, working hard, and hoping you don't end the day in the stocks or under a pile of angry pigs. Because in the Middle Ages, work doesn't set you free. It just keeps you from starving. It's a crisp morning in the village, and you've barely managed a half bowl of gruel before the Reeves' son is banging on your door like he's auditioning for a medieval metal band. "Manor court today," he yells, breathless and proud of the minor panic he's caused. You're summoned. You don't ask why. That never helps. Instead, you tie your belt, comb your hair with your fingers, and prepare yourself for the most nerve-wracking social event in peasant society, manor court. Held once every few weeks, Manor court is where disputes get settled, punishments are handed out, and petty grievances get aired like laundry on a windy day. It's not a place of high drama, no grand juries or powdered wigs. Just the lord, or his steward, a few village elders, and everyone else standing around pretending not to enjoy the show. You arrive at the open-air clearing where court is held. A makeshift bench has been set up under an oak tree, and the steward, cloaked in somber grey wool, is already scribbling notes with a quill that looks like it barely survived the last session. Villagers gather around, murmuring. Some bring their children. One woman's brought snacks. It's not just justice. It's entertainment. The steward clears his throat and reads the charges. John Fletcher let his pigs run through the Lord's herb garden. Agnes Taylor accused Widow Mirren of stealing her laundry. And you are apparently in trouble for trespassing on the domain. Which is a fancy way of saying you walked across the Lord's private field to shortcut home last week. Yes, that shortcut through the barley. That's a finable offence. You stand awkwardly in front of the bench while everyone pretends not to know what you did. You plead ignorance. The steward frowns. He notes that you've done this before. You nod slowly, unsure if lying will help or just double your fine. Eventually, he declares your punishment, a penny to the court and a warning. You breathe a sigh of relief. It could have been worse. Last time, someone got dunked in the duck pond. As the court continues, you watch other cases unfold. A man's fined for picking apples from the Lord's orchard. A woman is chastised for not maintaining the boundary hedge on her plot. One unlucky soul is accused of brewing ale too weak to qualify as real ale, a crime almost as serious as tax evasion. She argues. The steward sniffs a sample. Judgment, guilty. She's ordered to pour it out and start over. Court isn't just about punishment. It's about maintaining order. In a world without police, every squabble has the potential to fester into a feud. The manor court is the pressure valve, and the steward is the one with his hand on it. The rules are simple: obey the Lord's commands, respect your neighbors, and don't let your goats wander where they shouldn't. That last one is apparently broken with alarming frequency. You learn quickly that justice isn't blind, it's just nearsighted and very partial to the wealthy. The Lord's nephew, for instance, is caught hunting rabbits in the forbidden forest. He's let off with a chuckle and a warning. Meanwhile, poor Gregory gets fined for looking suspiciously at the Reeves cabbage. You mentally note to keep your expressions cabbage neutral in the future. Historians still debate the fairness of medieval manorial courts. Some argue that they were surprisingly democratic, offering common folk a voice and platform. Others suggest they were little more than a tool for enforcing feudal power and collecting extra income. Either way, they were an essential part of rural life, and also excellent gossip fuel. By midday, court wraps up. The steward retires to the manor house. The crowd disperses. And you, lighter by 1 penny and a little bit of pride, head back to the village square. But the day's not done. You still need to pay your tithe, 1/10 of your recent grain harvest, to the local priest. You trudge to the tithe barn, where a beady-eyed clerk tallies your sack of barley with suspicious thoroughness. He weighs it. He frowns. He weighs it again. Finally, he nods and writes your name in a dusty ledger. Congratulations, you're officially spiritually compliant. Just outside the barn, you overhear someone whispering that the miller's been shorting flour again. That's dangerous gossip. The miller holds the power of bread. Accuse him, and your next loaf might taste like vengeance. As the sun sets, the village settles. Today's court cases are already being retold with extra drama. The woman fined for laundry theft? She apparently tried to bite the steward. The weak ale? Some claim it turned a man's stomach inside out. You sit by the fire, quietly musing over your own brush with the law. A penny gone. A warning received. But you're still here. Still breathing. Still free, well, as free as a serf can be. And in the grand ledger of medieval survival, that's enough to keep you out of the duck pond. For now. You wake to the mournful clang of the church bell. Not the usual cheerful rooster noise or someone tripping over a pig. This is a slow, solemn toll, echoing across the misty village like a divine alarm clock. Sunday has arrived. It's time for church, confession, and a fresh helping of medieval guilt. You dress with extra care, meaning you wipe yesterday's porridge off your tunic and try to flatten the side of your hair that's mimicking a cowlick sculpture. In this world, appearances matter, especially when God is watching. And believe me, people are absolutely convinced he is, and that he's got a really long memory. The church is the only stone building for miles, towering above the thatched huts like a spiritual lighthouse. It smells of incense, damp stone, and unwashed robes. Inside, villagers file in, heads bowed, eyes low, doing their best impressions of piety. You join the procession, sliding onto a wooden bench that's been worn smooth by centuries of sore backsides. The priest appears in a robe that was once white. He begins in Latin, which you don't understand, and most of the congregation doesn't either. But the rhythm is familiar. There's a comforting mumble to it. Like a bedtime story where you're also the villain. After prayers comes the main event, confession. One by one, villagers shuffle to the front to mumble their sins through a screen. The list is predictably local: stole a turnip, skipped mass, yelled at the reeve, thought impure thoughts about the blacksmith's apprentice. The priest listens, nods, offers penance, usually in the form of prayers or small tasks, and sends them on their way. Your turn comes. You confess to stepping on a chicken, skipping a tithe payment, and maybe, just maybe, cursing when you dropped a bucket on your foot. The priest sighs. He's heard worse. He assigns you 5 Hail Marys and a day of helping in the graveyard. You accept your sentence with a solemn nod, already regretting it. The church is more than a place of worship. It's the village's heartbeat. Births, deaths, marriages, all are recorded here. Your soul's official scorecard is maintained in its ledgers. Miss too many masses and people notice. Act too joyfully during Lent? You might be whispered about. It's spiritual accountability, medieval style. Outside, a wooden board near the entrance lists recent edicts from the bishop and the local lord. Today's highlights include a ban on dancing near holy shrines, again, a warning about false relics being sold by traveling merchants, someone bought a splinter of Noah's Ark last week, and an announcement about next week's Saints' Day feast. You feel a flutter of hope. Saints' Day usually means actual food and maybe a song that doesn't involve repentance. The priest delivers a sermon about sin, obedience, and the importance of humility. It's delivered with the charisma of a sleepy turnip, but everyone listens. Not because it's inspiring, but because the church is powerful. In some ways, more so than the Lord. The church owns land. It dictates your holidays. It controls your eternal destiny, or so everyone believes. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers genuinely feared hellfire or just went along with the rituals because it was expected. Some point to private journals that express doubt. Others cite the sheer number of holy relics, pilgrimages, and patron saints as evidence of deep-rooted faith. Either way, God is everywhere. In your greetings, God give you good day, your curses, by Christ's bones, and your diet, no meat on Fridays, unless you're creative with labeling. Later in the day, you're sent to help the gravedigger, per your penance. The graveyard is quiet, solemn, and slightly overpopulated. Many stones are unmarked, just rough shapes with worn etchings. The newest grave belongs to a child who died of fever. The older ones lean like tired sentinels. You help clear weeds and place fresh flowers, dandelions, technically, on a few graves. There's something peaceful about it, in a morbid way. Life is short. Brutally so. Most people you know won't live past 40. Half the children born this year won't make it to next. And yet, here you are, pulling weeds among the stones, oddly grateful. That evening, the bell rings again. This time for Vespers, night prayers. You return to the church, legs sore, soul slightly lighter. The priest chants. The congregation hums along. Candles flicker in niches. Shadows dance across the stone. As you kneel, you think about the villagers around you. Some genuinely believe every word. Others are just trying not to draw attention. A few are likely planning tomorrow's chores or remembering that they forgot to feed the pig. But no one speaks during the prayers. The silence is complete. Heavy. Reverent. And for a moment, you understand the power of it. Not the fear, not the guilt, but the shared ritual. The sense that, even in mud-caked tunics and lice-filled hair, you're part of something larger. Something ancient. You leave the church in darkness, guided by the stars and the faint glow of hearths. Your penance is complete. Your conscience is cleanish. And your soul, for now, is safe. You're ankle deep in slop, and someone's moaning about a headache so bad it feels like the devil's taken up residence in their skull. Welcome to the medieval village's version of healthcare. Spoiler, you might survive the headache, but you'll wish you hadn't asked for help. It starts innocently enough. You cut your hand on a splinter while repairing a fence. It's not deep, just a little scrape, but the local healer insists it needs purifying. That sounds reassuring until you realize it involves wine, a feather, and something that smells suspiciously like vinegar and cat breath. She blows on the wound and chants a few words. You don't feel better, but she does, which apparently counts as progress. Still, the pain lingers. So the village elder recommends you visit the barber surgeon. You remember him, the one with the tooth hooks and bloodletting bowl who cut your hair with all the grace of a furious squirrel. But hey, your options are limited. His workspace is part barbershop, part torture chamber. The tools are terrifying. Rusty blades, curved needles, something that looks like it escaped from a bear trap. He's cheerful, though. Offers you a seat and a bit of ale to dull the edge. You ask for a diagnosis. He pokes your wound and shrugs. Bad humors, he says. might be your liver. This diagnosis seems unrelated to your hand, but he's already reaching for the leeches. Yes, leeches. Because when something goes wrong in your medieval body, the answer is usually, drain it. According to humoral theory, you are made up of 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you're sick, it means they're out of balance. The solution? Remove some. Preferably the most visible one. He slaps a fat, squiggly leech onto your arm. You try not to scream as it latches on with the enthusiasm of a tax collector during tithe season. You sit there for 10 minutes, watching it swell like a tiny, satisfied wineskin. When it falls off, he declares you balanced. You feel dizzy. If things get worse, say, the wound turns green or starts to smell like spoiled sheep, you'll be advised to seek stronger measures. Cauterization is popular. They heat a piece of iron until it glows, then press it to your flesh. It's as painful as it sounds. The theory is simple: if it burns enough to hurt, it must be working. More severe issues are passed along to the monastic infirmary, if you're lucky enough to live near one. These early hospitals are run by monks who offer prayer, herbal remedies, and an ambience of quiet dread. They'll give you a tisane of chamomile and mutter Latin over your swollen hand. If you're deemed incurable, they offer you a clean place to die and someone to hold your hand while you confess your final sins. Back in the village, the local wise woman offers a second opinion. She gives you a poultice made from herbs, spider webs, and something she calls moss from a north-facing tree. It smells awful, but the pain lessens slightly. Whether it's the moss or your sheer desperation is unclear. And then there's the priest's advice: sin causes illness. Clearly, your hand is a warning. He recommends confession, 3 Our Fathers, and the sign of the cross over your wound. He also mentions that Saint Apollonia once cured a man's boils just by being prayed to, and maybe, just maybe, you should stop cursing at chickens. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was completely ineffective or just deeply misunderstood. Some treatments had merit: honey for wounds, willow bark for pain, which contains salicin, a relative of aspirin. Others, like applying a dead pigeon to the chest or stuffing a goose feather soaked in brandy up one's nose, remain dubious at best. But medical care is only part of the horror. Disease is everywhere. You hear rumors of a nearby village where people are dropping dead overnight, covered in black spots. Whispers of plague send shivers down your spine. You double your prayers, burn more incense, and try to avoid rats. But the truth is, medicine in this world is reactive. You get sick, they try things. If you die, they say it was God's will. Still, not all hope is lost. Some herbal remedies genuinely help. The wise woman's comfrey salve eases your swelling. Yarrow stops your bleeding. You even chew on mint leaves to ease nausea, and it works, unless the mint is growing near the privy trench. Then, not so much. By evening, your wound looks better. Or at least, not worse. You clean it with hot wine and bandage it in linen. You sit by the hearth, your arm aching, your stomach grumbling, your soul slightly rattled. You've survived your first brush with medieval medicine. Congratulations. You weren't trepanned. You didn't get your limb sawed off. And no one tied you to a stake and blamed your wound on a fairy curse. Yet. You sip weak ale and cradle your bandaged hand, watching the fire flicker. Somewhere outside, the barber surgeon sharpens his blades, just in case someone else comes in with bad humors and an unfortunate sense of timing. The sun rises slowly today, filtered through a thick mist that rolls across the village like a damp wool blanket. You stretch, scratch your flea bites, and stumble outside, only to be met by a wall of stench so powerful it physically moves your eyebrows. Welcome to the grand and fragrant domain of medieval hygiene. You start the morning with your usual wash, meaning you splash some vaguely grey water from the communal bucket onto your face and call it a day. Bathing isn't daily. It's not even weekly. It's aspirational. You aim for once a month, unless it rains enough to count. Soap exists, yes, but it's handmade and smells like someone tried to perfume a barn. It's made from animal fat and ash, boiled into a greasy lump and prized like gold. The village bathhouse, if you're lucky enough to have one, operates on a rotating schedule and questionable water quality. Privacy is limited. Men and women might bathe together depending on the local custom. Modesty is a loose concept, unless the priest walks in which case everyone becomes suddenly pious and damp. You've heard that nobles bathe more often. They have heated tubs, perfumed oils, servants with soft towels. But even they are wary. Some doctors claim that bathing too often weakens the body, opens the pores, and lets in disease. That's the medieval equivalent of don't go outside with wet hair, or you'll catch a cold. Instead of washing, most people rely on dry cleaning methods, changing underclothes, brushing dirt off with a cloth, or dousing themselves in herbs. Rosemary, lavender, and sage are popular choices for those who can afford them. You've got mint and hope. Today, you're tasked with cleaning the latrine trench behind the cookhouse. It's a job so foul it has its own unofficial anthem, sung by whoever's unlucky enough to be holding the shovel. You hum it grimly as you scoop sludge and try not to breathe too deeply. Medieval villages don't have sewer systems. Waste is managed via pits, trenches, and the occasional chamber pot thrown from a window. With luck, someone yells "Gardez-le" first. You finish the task, somehow more soaked than when you started. You consider changing clothes, until you remember you only own 2 tunics, and the other one is being used to patch a roof. By midday, you're invited to the local healer's hut. She offers you a salve for your hands, which are starting to resemble tree bark. It's made from animal fat, beeswax, and crushed herbs. It works surprisingly well. You apply it liberally and spend the next hour smelling like a salad marinated in bacon grease. Afternoon brings a surprise. A traveling peddler has set up near the market with goods from distant lands. Among his wares is exotic perfume from France, probably fermented roses and goat sweat, but it sells fast. One villager snags a tiny vial and dabs it behind her ears. It masks her scent for about 8 minutes before the usual barnyard bouquet returns. Another item catches your eye, a hair comb made of bone. It's carved with runes and allegedly wards off lice. You buy it with a few coins and test it immediately. It doesn't remove lice. It does, however, make your scalp bleed slightly. A win, depending on your standards. Historians still argue whether medieval hygiene was truly appalling or simply misunderstood. Bathing was more common in early medieval Europe than many assume. Public bathhouses thrived in towns for centuries, until concerns about immorality and disease shut many down. Monks often bathed weekly. Some peasants, particularly in warmer climates, washed regularly in rivers or used sweat baths similar to modern saunas. But your village leans into the earthy aesthetic. Cleanliness is relative. If you don't smell worse than the pig pen, you're doing great. You visit the local church in the evening, as the priest offers a sermon on purity, spiritual and otherwise. He talks about keeping the soul clean, though his robes are visibly crusty. Everyone nods solemnly, sniffing occasionally, trying not to judge each other's personal aroma. Back in your hut, you prepare for bed. The goat's already curled up, bless her. You wipe your face one more time with your tunic hem, swat away a particularly enthusiastic flea, and lie down. It's not a clean life, not in the modern sense. But it has its rhythms. You grow accustomed to the scents, the scratchiness, the feel of dried sweat and dust in your hair. You stop longing for baths and start celebrating days when you don't fall in the trench. Because in medieval life, hygiene isn't a luxury. It's a negotiation between your comfort, your dignity, and your access to soap that doesn't smell like regret. You open your eyes to see your breath curling in the cold morning air like a ghost escaping your mouth. There's frost on the inside of your hut's walls, and your straw mattress feels like someone soaked it in chilled broth. Welcome to medieval winter, where heating is optional, misery is mandatory, and your main source of warmth is hope. And maybe a goat. The fire in the hearth died sometime during the night. You'd rekindle it, but your kindling is damp and your fingers aren't entirely convinced they want to participate in the day. You curl tighter in your tunic, which now doubles as pajamas, coat, and emotional support fabric. Outside, the world crunches underfoot. The pond's frozen. The sky is grey, heavy, and brooding like a disgruntled monk. Winter doesn't just mean cold. It means survival mode. The harvest's long over. What you've got stored is all there is. Your meals shrink: barley bread, salted turnips, dried peas, and if you're lucky, a piece of old cheese so hard you could use it as a shield. You soak it in broth to soften it. The broth is mostly hot water with wishful thinking. You head to the granary to check your rations. The steward has locked the goods stores inside, but you've got your personal stash tucked in a sealed crock under the floorboards. You lift the lid and sigh with relief, still there, still mold-free. A small victory. You run your fingers through the grains like a dragon admiring its hoard. Today's tasks are fewer. The fields are too frozen to plow, and no one's keen to dig ditches with a pickaxe just to collapse in frostbite. So you gather firewood, repair drafty walls, and help reinforce the animal pens. The pigs are particularly grumpy. One of them bites your sleeve. You tell it off politely. It does not apologize. Midday arrives with little fanfare. The village seems slower in winter. The buzz of labor fades to a quiet rhythm: chop wood, boil water, mend clothes. The blacksmith's forge provides rare warmth. You linger near it longer than necessary, pretending to be interested in the horseshoes while thawing your backside. As the sun dips low, because winter days are nothing if not short, you find yourself drawn to stories. Everyone is. At night, villagers gather in the largest hut or by the fire in the alewife's shack. Children huddle under blankets. Elders cough dramatically. Someone brings a jug of weak ale, and the storytelling begins. You're treated to tales of saints, dragons, ghosts, and lost kings. Your favorite is the one about the spectral hound that guards a hidden treasure under the old well. You know it's nonsense, but in this cold, dark season, even nonsense feels warm. Someone else tells a story about a knight who wandered into a cursed wood and came out 3 years later with a beard that spoke in riddles. Everyone laughs, even the baby, who you're pretty sure doesn't understand but enjoys the communal energy. Then come the pagan remnants. Quietly, of course. The priest wouldn't approve. But the old woman in the corner starts whispering about spirits in the snow and the wild hunt, a ghostly procession that flies through the skies midwinter, sweeping up lost souls. You glance out the shuttered window and wrap your blanket tighter. Historians still argue whether medieval people saw winter purely as hardship or also as a time of spiritual depth and community bonding. The evidence is mixed. Diaries and church records describe hunger, sickness, and death. But they also speak of songs, games, storytelling, and quiet reverence. Winter was brutal, but it brought people together, like a very cold, slightly haunted group hug. That night, you huddle in your straw bed, clutching a hot rock from the hearth wrapped in cloth. It radiates heat for about 20 minutes, then becomes just another lump under your legs. You can hear the wind groaning through the gaps in the wall. Something creaks on the roof. You close your eyes and dream of a summer where your hands aren't frozen to your own belt. You're not alone in this. The whole village is enduring it with you. Sharing food, firewood, and stories. Watching each other for signs of illness. Whispering prayers. Clinging to the rhythms of the church calendar, Candlemas, Lent, Easter. Each one a step closer to warmth. In the quiet, as the wind howls and snow begins to fall, you feel a strange sense of peace. This is survival stripped to its simplest form. No distractions. Just breath, warmth, and the steady thrum of life in a world determined to freeze you out. Tomorrow, you'll check the roof for leaks, help insulate the walls with straw, and maybe, if the pond stays frozen, join the children sliding across the ice using old shoes as skates. There's joy even here, even now. You just have to squint to see it. And remember, if you're cold, so is your chicken. Bring her inside. She won't say thank you, but she might stop stealing your bread. The rooster's not crowing this morning, which either means he's finally taken a vow of silence or something's gone terribly wrong. You step outside and hear murmurs, nervous ones. The kind that ripple through a medieval village like a cough in a crowded chapel. You shuffle over to the town square, where a man with soot on his tunic is babbling to anyone who'll listen. Swear on St. Dunstan's beard, I saw it with my own eyes, he gasps. Old Joan dunked her hand in boiling water, pulled it out clean, and no burn at all. The crowd gasps. This can mean only one thing, a trial by ordeal. You blink. This is not the morning you expected. Someone's accused of theft, or witchcraft, or offending a local chicken, it's not clear yet. But without witnesses or evidence, the village has turned to divine judgment. Because in the absence of forensics, nothing says justice like scalding your hand in a cauldron and hoping God likes you enough to heal it quickly. You're herded with the others to the church, where the accused stands trembling before the priest. He explains, in a tone that suggests he wishes he were anywhere else, that the woman must undergo an ordeal of boiling water. She'll plunge her hand in, retrieve a stone from the bottom, and wait 3 days. If it's healed, she's innocent. If it's infected, she's guilty. logic at its finest. The water bubbles menacingly as prayers are muttered and incense curls around your face like sanctified fog. She dips her hand in. The sizzle is audible. She doesn't scream. You're both horrified and impressed. Back outside, the village buzzes. Some say it's a fair test, God's will, revealed through blisters. Others mutter about superstition and question whether divine justice cares about misplaced carrots. Historians still debate whether these ordeals were truly believed or simply tools of intimidation. Some sources suggest that healed verdicts were offered when the church wanted to smooth things over quietly. Others imply people sincerely thought heaven ran a burn clinic. Later in the day, the Reeves cousin is hauled up for swearing false oaths. Not about taxes or labor, but something far more sacred, saying he saw a wolf fly over the fields. He claims he was drunk. The court still insists on an oath by saint relics. He has to swear his truth while touching a fragment of Saint Edmund's femur, kept in the church reliquary in a fancy box that smells faintly of beeswax and old miracles. You find this fascinating, mainly because the box is more elaborate than the granary. It's carved with angels and tiny animals. The priest opens it with a flourish, like he's revealing the world's most sacred lunch. The man swears. Everyone waits. No lightning strikes. He's cleared. Probably just drunk after all. Justice isn't always so dramatic. Sometimes, people resolve disputes through something called compurgation. Basically, it's character witnesses, 12 neighbors swearing you're not a goat thief. It works surprisingly well, unless you've been hogging the ale or spreading rumors. Reputation is everything. In a world where written records are rare and literacy is a privilege, your name carries more weight than coin. But occasionally, things get darker. You hear whispers of a man put on trial last year using the ordeal of fire. He had to carry a red-hot iron for a set number of paces. If his hand healed clean, he was innocent. If it festered, well, you can guess. He didn't live long enough to appeal. Still, these aren't daily events. Most minor offenses are handled with fines or public shaming. Got caught stealing bread? You might be made to wear a sign that says thief or sit in the stocks while villagers pelt you with turnips. Sometimes, the punishment is oddly poetic. One man who let his pig eat from the church garden had to lead it through town wearing a crown of weeds. This morning's accused will wait now. Her bandaged hand held carefully, she's sent home, and the village will gather again in 3 days. People pretend to forget, but they watch. And whisper. And if the wound looks clean, well, God has spoken. You return to your hut, your mind buzzing with images of boiling cauldrons and relics in golden boxes. It's a reminder, justice here isn't about evidence. It's about spectacle, belief, and a heavy dose of fear. You toss another log into your hearth fire, watching the flames dance. You glance at your own hands, calloused, blistered, but unburned. You've never stolen, never lied under oath, never insulted a saint's toenail. But that doesn't mean you're safe. All it takes is one rumor, one bad harvest, one angry neighbor. So you stay quiet. Respectful. You nod to the priest, you tend your garden, and you make very sure never to let your goat wander near the Lord's hedgerow. Because in this world, innocence isn't proven with facts, it's proven with skin, smoke, and how fast your wounds heal under God's watchful eye. You can smell the excitement before you see it, literally. The air's thick with roasting meat, fish brine, damp wool, and a generous helping of unwashed humanity. That's right, today is market day. And for a medieval villager like you, it's the closest thing to a holiday short of surviving a full winter without burying half your family. The town isn't far, just a few miles along a rutted track that passes through fields and hedgerows. You join the procession of villagers hauling carts, baskets, and small screaming children. Everyone's heading to the same place, because market day isn't just about buying things. It's about gossip, spectacle, and the tantalizing possibility of seeing a chicken juggle or a pig that allegedly sings in Latin. As you near the town gates, you pass a line of stalls already buzzing with activity. Vendors shout over each other, hawking goods with all the subtlety of a medieval auctioneer on caffeine. Eels, still twitching, one cries, waving a basket of long, squirming fish. Fresh pies. Only slightly burnt, yells another. You eye a tray of tarts suspiciously. They look like they've seen things. The smells are overwhelming. Spices, manure, beeswax, smoked ham, unwashed armpit, and wet leather all swirl together in a scent cocktail so powerful you briefly forget your name. You press forward, clutching your small coin pouch. You've got exactly 4 pennies and a button you hope looks valuable. You start with the essentials. Bread, hearty, dark, and dense enough to qualify as a weapon. Then a chunk of cheese that may have begun its journey toward sentience. The vendor insists it's aged. You nod, not wanting to insult anything that seems capable of blinking. Next, you browse the stalls for something fun. You spot a booth selling ribbons dyed in colors so bright they must be forbidden. You buy one, red, flamboyant, and probably faded by next Tuesday. But it's worth it. Your goat's going to look fantastic. The real action, though, is among the entertainers. A juggler balances on a barrel while tossing flaming sticks. A puppet show reenacts the latest scandal, something involving a noble, a chicken, and a pair of stolen boots. A man in a tattered robe offers to read your fortune for half a loaf of bread. You hand it over. He looks at your palm, frowns, and whispers, "You'll marry a widow and be gored by an angry pig." You thank him politely and back away. By midday, the market is heaving. You weave through the crowd, dodging a boy selling bees in clay pots, a woman offering miracle root that smells suspiciously like carrot, and a thief who attempts to accidentally hug you. You hug him back aggressively, and he scurries off. Victory. You pause at the tanner's stall. It reeks of animal hide and chemicals. The tanner wears gloves caked in something that should never be named. He's gruff but honest, and you buy a small leather pouch for your herbs. It's stiff, but less itchy than your current storage method, a damp sock. Nearby, the town crier shouts the latest news, a new tax on barrels, a royal marriage 2 kingdoms over, and a warning about wolves with a taste for unattended toddlers. Everyone nods solemnly, except the man selling wolf traps, who cheers. Market day isn't just commerce, it's politics, religion, and social currency. You overhear rumors, the Lord's daughter might be pregnant. The blacksmith's cousin joined a crusade. Someone in a nearby village claims they caught a fairy in a jar. You can't verify any of it, but it makes the turnips go down easier. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were truly democratic spaces or tightly controlled by guilds and lords. Evidence points to both. certain stalls require licenses. Some goods are taxed heavily. But for most villagers, this is the one day they can glimpse the wider world. Exotic spices, strange cloth, foreign coins, all pass through these muddy lanes like glittering rumors. As the sun dips low, the crowd begins to thin. You've spent your coins, bartered your button for a spoon, and traded half your barley for a pair of socks, which may or may not be cursed. You gather your things and prepare for the walk home. But before you go, you stop at a small stand run by a grey-haired woman with a sharp gaze. She's selling beeswax candles. You buy one. The scent is warm, soothing, with a hint of honey. It'll last a week if you ration it. 2 nights if you indulge. You walk home with sore feet, a lighter pouch, and the quiet satisfaction of being part of something bigger than your village. A community of strangers, all bartering, laughing, arguing, and swindling together. It's chaos. It's dirty. It's exhilarating. Back in your hut, you light your new candle and let the flickering glow warm your straw bed. You unwrap your cheese, nibble a corner, and decide it's probably not poisonous. Probably. And as you drift off to sleep, you dream of dancing puppets, ribboned goats, and the glorious, smelly, magical mayhem of market day. You wake to the sound of giggling outside your hut. Not the usual kind, the children pulling the goat's tail again, but softer, sneakier. You poke your head out and see 2 teens sitting too close by the well, their hands awkwardly near but not quite touching. Ah yes, love is in the air. And also a strong whiff of manure. You stretch and smile. Today's not about turnips or taxes. Today, you get to learn the fine art of medieval romance. Which, let's be clear, is less about flowers and poetry and more about not being betrothed to your cousin for land rights. In your world, love is practical. Marriages aren't usually about passion, they're about survival, alliances, and how many chickens one party can bring to the table. Still, that doesn't stop people from sneaking glances, passing notes carved into sticks, or braiding a lover's hair ribbon into their tunic laces. Courtship, such as it is, involves layers of social rules and a healthy dose of awkwardness. You can't just walk up and flirt, you need permission from a parent, ideally both. Unless you're bold, or reckless, or drunk, in which case all bets are off and you might be wed by sunrise. Today, the village is buzzing. There's going to be a celebration tonight, a saint's day, or maybe a belated solstice feast someone finally remembered. That means music, dancing, and the very real possibility of someone proposing in front of a bonfire. You decide to prepare accordingly. You attempt to brush your hair with a bone comb and splash your face with water that doesn't seem too slimy. You notice your neighbor, Alice, tying a sprig of rosemary into her braid. It's said to promote fidelity, and, more importantly, it smells decent. You rummage for something similar and settle for sage. You smell like soup, but a clean soup. At midday, you help raise the maypole. It's not spring, but no one's in the mood to argue. The pole's decorated with ribbons, flowers, and tiny bells. It's a miracle it doesn't fall over instantly. Children chase each other in circles while the elders argue about whether it's too pagan. You overhear a boy reciting a poem to a girl near the ale tent. It's mostly about her eyes and possibly some geese. She giggles and runs off. He stands there, proud. Romance achieved. Afternoon brings preparations. The baker pulls out his emergency stash of flour and bakes small round loaves with herbs pressed into the crust. The alewife pours out mugs of her strongest brew, and people start combing their hair with intention. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a puddle and decide you're not horrifying. Good enough. The feast begins with music. A fiddler plays an off-key tune, accompanied by someone slapping a drum made from stretched goat skin. The rhythm is uneven, but everyone claps anyway. Dancing erupts in waves, young people leading the charge while the older villagers tap their toes and pretend not to watch for marriage prospects. You get pulled into a circle dance and spin so fast your tunic flares. You laugh, dizzy and gasping, and nearly fall into the pig pen. It's the most fun you've had in weeks, maybe months. As the fire grows higher, so does the energy. There's singing, a little flirting, and one very intense staring contest that seems to double as a proposal. Someone's already tripped and landed face first in a stew pot. They're fine. Mostly. You sit down to catch your breath and chat with an elder. He tells you how he courted his wife with a song about her chickens. She hated it, but married him anyway because he had the best onion field. Love, he says, comes after the harvest. If it's still there come spring, then it's real. Historians still argue how much choice medieval people had in love. Some records show arranged marriages as standard, especially for land-owning families. Others suggest peasant unions were more flexible, still bound by social norms, but with room for affection, negotiation, and even elopement. Church records sometimes show banns being interrupted by sudden marriages that clearly had a backstory. Back near the fire, someone starts telling a story about a maiden who fell in love with a knight. She refused her arranged marriage, ran into the woods, and lived on berries until the knight found her. The villagers sigh at the tale. Realistic? Not really. But it feels good to believe. Later, you see two people sneaking off together. No one comments. Everyone knows what that walk means. If they're caught, there might be a fine, or a marriage. Or both. You head back to your hut, cheeks flushed from firelight and dancing. You didn't fall in love tonight, but you did learn a few things. Like how to twirl without hitting someone in the face. And how to tie your belt in a way that actually looks good. You light your candle and slip into bed, still humming the fiddler's tune. Romance here isn't about grand gestures. It's about small looks, shared chores, and surviving a winter together without screaming. That, you think, is as good as any love story. And as you drift off, the echoes of laughter and music fade into the night. Tomorrow, the chores return. The dirt won't dig itself. But for now, your dreams are filled with dancing ribbons and the lingering scent of rosemary. You wake up to an eerie silence. No roosters crowing. No children shrieking. Even the goat seems unnerved, standing still with her ears twitching at sounds you can't yet hear. You step outside your hut and feel it, something heavy in the air. The villagers are gathered near the edge of the fields, their faces pale. And then you see it, smoke. A thick black column curls from the horizon, rising above the trees like a bad omen. There's talk of soldiers. Raiders. War. You feel your stomach drop. Medieval life is already hard enough, but nothing disrupts the fragile balance of peasant survival like war. You're not on a battlefield, not wearing armor or waving banners. But war doesn't need you to be a soldier to destroy your life. It just needs to pass by. By mid-morning, the reeve is yelling for everyone to pack what they can and move toward the woods. Women grab children. Men carry sacks of grain and tools. You scramble to gather your meager possessions, your cheese, your cloak, your one decent spoon. The goat follows you, which is comforting. She knows the evacuation drill better than you do. Historians still argue whether peasant villages were routinely sacked in times of conflict or just occasionally unlucky. Records show both fates. Some communities negotiated with passing armies, offering food and coin in exchange for peace. Others were less fortunate, becoming the backdrop to scorched earth tactics and noble feuds that had nothing to do with them. You reach the forest with the others, hiding among the trees. It's not glamorous. You huddle under branches, try to stay warm, and keep the goat from chewing your sleeve. The children cry quietly. The elders stare into the distance. One man mutters prayers under his breath, crossing himself with frantic energy. Hours pass. The sky darkens with smoke. Then come the sounds, distant shouting, the clatter of hooves, and a scream that makes your blood run cold. No one moves. You're told to stay silent, hidden. You grip a stick for protection, knowing full well it won't help. If soldiers come through, they'll take what they want. Food. Animals. Anything shiny. Sometimes people. By evening, the noise fades. A scout reports that the soldiers moved on, skirting the village. They didn't enter, but they passed close enough to take the Lord's storehouse. That means your grain taxes are gone. And the manor itself? Smoldering. You return to the village slowly, cautiously. The hut roofs are intact, but someone's cart has been overturned, and the church bell is cracked. The manor house, once imposing, is little more than charred wood and smoke. The steward is gone. No one knows where, or if he's still breathing. The reeve takes charge, issuing tasks. You're sent to check on the livestock. The pigs are jittery. One cow is missing. The henhouse door is open, and feathers litter the ground. You find one chicken alive, hiding in a bucket. You name her Lucky. That night, the village feels hollow. No music. No laughter. Just people huddled around low fires, whispering about what they almost lost. You eat your dinner in silence, a crust of bread, a few beans, and a growing realization that everything could vanish with a few galloping horses and a bad decision made 100 miles away. You think about the soldiers. What they must look like. Armor, swords, strange accents. You imagine them riding past without seeing you. You wonder what would have happened if they had. Not all war comes with swords and smoke. Sometimes it arrives through taxes. The next week, a herald from the king passes through, announcing a levy for the next campaign. Every household must contribute. If not coin, then grain or livestock. You can't spare any. No one can. Some families leave. They load carts and disappear down the road, hoping the next village is safer. Others dig deeper, literally, building hidden caches and makeshift shelters. You stay. You don't have the means to run. One night, while mending your tunic, you hear a new rumor: recruiters are coming. Conscription. The war needs men. If your name is drawn, you'll be given a spear, a patched tunic, and a brief lesson in not dying. Then off to fight for a lord you've never seen, in a place you can't pronounce. You practice walking quietly. You memorize paths through the forest. You learn how to carry your spoon and your dignity at the same time. Historians often say medieval villagers were passive victims of larger events. But you don't feel passive. You feel alert. Ready. The village, wounded but alive, continues. The goat still munches everything in sight. The baker still bakes. The priest still prays. You mend the church roof. You help rebuild the manor storehouse. You share your herbs and listen to stories from old men who remember worse times. And you survive. That's all anyone can do. You're up before the sun again. But this time, there's a distinct buzz in the air, not the usual mosquito swarm, but whispers, anticipation, a little fear. A knight is visiting. Not just passing through. He's coming to the village square for a display. And somehow, for reasons no one can fully explain, you've been volunteered to help. You groan, stretch, and start mentally preparing your will. Knights, in your world, aren't fairy tale princes. They're more like elite tanks in slightly dented tin cans. Clad in steel, seated atop horses that weigh more than your house, they represent war, nobility, and a slight threat to your ribcage. You make your way to the square, where the reeve is pacing nervously, muttering about protocol. The villagers gather quickly, especially the children, who are already play-fighting with sticks. Then the knight arrives. And suddenly, you understand why everyone's either silent or gasping. He's enormous. His armor clinks and groans with every movement. His horse, black and steaming, stomps like it wants to start a fight. The knight's helmet is shaped like a lion's face, and his shield gleams with a golden crest. You don't know which lord he serves, but you're not about to ask. He dismounts with surprising grace for someone carrying a small forge on his body. The armor is breathtaking, polished steel, reinforced plates, chainmail peeking beneath the joints. He clanks as he walks, but somehow it sounds dignified, not awkward. You, in your best tunic and slightly bent shoes, suddenly feel like a scarecrow pretending to be a real person. Then the reeve points at you. This one will assist. Fantastic. The knight nods and hands you a wooden training sword. It's the size of your leg. You take it with both hands, almost fall over, and square up like someone who once watched someone else fight from a safe distance. The demonstration begins. He shows the crowd various forms, stances, sword swings, how to deflect a blow using a shield the size of your entire body. Then, the sparring. You step forward. He tells you to swing at him. You do. He doesn't even flinch. The sword bounces off his armor with a thunk, like a spoon hitting a kettle. You yelp. He chuckles. Then he taps you, lightly, with the flat of his blade. You fly backward 3 feet, land on your rear, and lose all your dignity in the space of 1 heartbeat. The children cheer. You're not sure for who. Historians often glamorize knights, and for good reason. They were elite warriors, sworn to codes of chivalry that included honor, loyalty, and protecting the weak. But reality was a little muddier. Knights could be heroes, or thugs with titles. Their armor made them nearly invincible to common folk, and their training started young, pages by 7, squires by 14, knights by 21. You, unfortunately, are 30 and have just sprained your ankle on your own humility. After the sparring, the knight speaks of campaigns far from here, sieges, skirmishes, and a place where the sea glows at night. He shows the crowd a curved blade from a Saracen warrior and a jeweled brooch taken from a battlefield. The crowd listens with wide eyes. He makes war sound like adventure. But you see it in his eyes, he's tired. His armor gleams, but his hands are scarred, his voice edged with something heavier than steel. Later, he removes parts of his armor to cool off. You're asked to help. That's when you realize what this stuff actually weighs. Just the breastplate feels like lifting your entire pig. The mail is heavier, scratchier, and smells like sweat, oil, and regret. Want to try it on? He asks, grinning. Of course you say yes. 10 minutes later, you're encased in chainmail and 2 plates of steel. You cannot move. Breathing is optional. Your arms feel like overcooked noodles. Everyone laughs. You take 1 step and immediately fall over. Knighthood, you decide, is not in your future. By evening, the knight prepares to leave. His horse is saddled, his gear packed. He thanks the villagers, tosses a few coins to the children, and nods at you with something between amusement and sympathy. Not bad, he says. You choose to take it as a compliment. After he rides off, the village hums with excitement. The blacksmith talks about forging better swords. The children duel with brooms. Even the reeve seems inspired, polishing his pitchfork like it's a lance. You limp home, bruised but proud. You got to touch a knight's armor. You got knocked over by a legendary figure. And you didn't die. That's practically chivalry in action. As you sit by the hearth, you remember how the knight's armor shimmered, how his presence commanded silence. And you realize something: while knights may seem invincible, they're just people under all that steel. Tired, scarred, and sometimes, just sometimes, willing to let a commoner swing a wooden sword at them for fun. You drift to sleep dreaming of shining armor, thundering hooves, and a version of yourself that didn't fall on his face in front of half the village. The night is gone, the children have returned to poking each other with sticks, and the village settles back into its usual rhythm of mud, labor, and occasional shouting. But today, there's something different in the air, a scent. Sweet. Spiced. Slightly burnt. And entirely unfamiliar. You follow your nose to the village square, where an unusual scene is unfolding. The Lord Steward is organizing a feast. Not just any feast, mind you. This one celebrates the local saint's day and coincides with a rare surplus from the manor's granary. Which means food. Real food. Possibly even meat that hasn't been dried into jerky or left to guess at its identity. The entire village is buzzing. Carts arrive with sacks of grain, barrels of ale, and, glory of glories, a whole roasted pig on a spit. You stare at it like it's a vision from a dream. The smell of sizzling fat, crisped skin, and smoky wood fills your lungs and nearly brings a tear to your eye. The alewife sets up her biggest cask. The baker is making flatbreads. Even the goat seems excited, bleating with a bit more flair than usual. You've been tasked with helping in the kitchen area, which really means standing near the fire, turning a spit, and trying not to burn your eyebrows off. The cook, who looks like he's been in this job since the time of dragons, grunts at you to keep turning. You do. Because this feast, this moment of joy, hinges on not ruining the pig. Feasts like this are rare. Maybe twice a year, if that. One for the saint, one for harvest. And sometimes, if the Lord is feeling generous or guilty, an extra one thrown in. Otherwise, food is strictly utilitarian. Bread, porridge, and the occasional questionable stew. But today? Today is decadence. The children are already bouncing with excitement, racing around the maple and screaming about honey cakes. You catch a glimpse of the Reeve sneaking a bite of cheese behind the ale tent. He makes eye contact and just shrugs. Then, just as you think things couldn't get better, the steward announces that the Lord himself will appear. In person. With his household. Which means more food, finer clothes, and at least one new insult about the village's aroma. But you don't care. If his arrival means extra goose legs, he can call you a mud-covered turnip all he likes. Historians note that while medieval life was overwhelmingly hard, these feast days played a crucial role in morale and community bonding. They weren't just excuses to eat, they were moments of reprieve, storytelling, and remembering that life, however fleeting, could still hold pleasure. By midday, the tables are set, long planks of wood laid over barrels and stumps. They're decorated with herbs, wildflowers, and the occasional sticky-fingered toddler. The food arrives in waves: meat pies, boiled greens, smoked fish, hard cheese, and trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread used as edible plates. You grab one and hope it holds long enough to avoid embarrassing yourself in front of the blacksmith's family. And the ale. Oh, the ale. It flows like a river of blurry joy. Strong, warm, and just bitter enough to distract you from the goat trying to steal your pie. There's singing. Not particularly good singing, but enthusiastic. A lute appears. Someone starts clapping rhythmically. A dance breaks out, chaotic, joyful, and filled with the kind of moves that suggest most people are making it up as they go. You're pulled into the circle. You spin. You trip. You recover with flair. The crowd cheers. Later, a storyteller stands on a barrel and begins reciting a tale of a brave peasant who once outwitted the devil by pretending to be dumber than he really was. You raise your mug in solidarity. Smart play. Then come the games, sack races, a pig chase, which the goat wins, oddly enough, and a contest to see who can throw a rock the farthest while reciting a prayer. You enter. You don't win. But you do hit a tree, which gets a respectable chuckle. As the sun sets, the bonfire is lit. It roars to life, crackling and spitting embers into the night sky. Shadows dance across the thatched roofs. Someone hands you a roasted apple glazed with honey. It's hot, sticky, and tastes like magic. You sit by the fire, full to bursting, watching sparks drift upward. Around you, villagers laugh, sing, and savor every bite, every gulp, every moment. For once, no one talks about taxes, war, or blisters. No one worries about tomorrow's chores or next month's rains. This is life at its sweetest. Brief, blazing, and precious. Eventually, you make your way home, stomach heavy and head light. You fall onto your straw bed without even changing clothes. The goat's already snoring in the corner. As you drift into sleep, you smile. because today you didn't just survive. You feasted. And in the harsh calendar of medieval life, that makes this day a miracle. The morning after the feast greets you like a wooden spoon to the forehead. Your head pounds, your stomach grumbles in protest, and your mouth feels like you licked the inside of a blacksmith's glove. You groan, roll over, and remember in flashes, the dancing, the apple, the goat somehow wearing a ribbon crown. It was worth it. You step outside into the pale sunlight and realize the entire village is in recovery mode. People shuffle around, bleary-eyed, clutching mugs of weak ale in hopes it'll calm their spinning heads. The priest is already scolding a group of teens for inappropriate bonfire conduct, though he doesn't elaborate and they're too tired to care. But don't get too comfortable. There's something else in the air this morning, whispers. Suspicious looks. A neighbor muttering under her breath and glancing at the cow like it's hiding secrets. That's right. It's gossip season. And in the medieval village, gossip is the lifeblood of entertainment, justice, and passive-aggressive warfare. You can almost hear it float through the air like invisible smoke. Did you hear what Thomas did with the fish? They say old Myra talks to her cat, and it answers. I swear the alewife's jug refills itself. Witchery, I tell you. You don't even have to go looking for it. Gossip finds you. The miller's wife corners you near the well and tells you that Agnes the spinner was seen speaking to a crow. For too long. A familiar, probably, she whispers. You nod, wide-eyed, unsure whether to laugh or start collecting wood for a stake. Then someone else pulls you aside and mentions that the baker's daughter has been meeting a boy from the next village, in secret. By the hedgerow. At night. Scandalous. You pretend to be shocked, though you've seen them together and frankly they seem adorable. Superstition, rumor, and medieval news swirl together in ways that would make modern tabloids look subtle. A goat born with a black spot? Portent of doom. A sudden illness? Probably the work of an envious neighbor. A cow refusing to produce milk? Definitely cursed. The local wise woman gets blamed, praised, and feared all at once depending on the day of the week and whether her remedies worked or made you puke your soul out. This fragile social network is kept afloat by fear, tradition, and an encyclopedic knowledge of who once tripped at the festival 4 years ago. Memory is long. Forgiveness is rare. You pass the carpenter, who looks nervously at the sky and mutters something about omens in the clouds. You look. It's just a bird. Possibly an angry one. But that's enough to get 3 more people glancing upward and crossing themselves. Later, you help the reeve reinforce the fence around the herb garden. He tells you, in confidence, that he suspects the herbs are being used for more than cooking. You lean in. Witchcraft, you ask. He shakes his head solemnly. Lust potions. You blink. Then nod gravely, as if this explains everything. It might. Historians still argue about the extent to which superstition ruled the daily lives of medieval people. Some point to church sermons railing against charms, amulets, and pagan rites as evidence of a population clinging to magic. Others suggest that most villagers balanced belief in saints with practical folk remedies. You just know your neighbor buried a horseshoe under her doorstep and her cabbages suddenly got 40% larger. In the afternoon, the priest gives a sermon on slander, urging villagers to stop accusing each other of heresy over bad bread or unusually friendly cats. It's well-intentioned but ineffective. By dinner, someone's already whispering that he misquoted scripture during Vespers. Then things get serious. A pig goes missing. Within minutes, a crowd gathers. Accusations fly. A boy says he saw someone in a cloak near the sty. A girl swears she heard squealing down by the stream. The missing pig becomes a mystery, a drama, a potential trial. By evening, it wanders back into the village, completely unharmed, chewing a beet it probably stole from your garden. Everyone pretends they weren't about to start a witch hunt. You give it a pat and name it chaos. As night falls, you sit by the fire, mulling over the day's stories. Who's flirting with who? Who might be cursed? Which chicken laid a greenish egg? It's messy, unreliable, often absurd. But this is your news network, your entertainment, your warning system. You make a mental note not to talk to any crows tomorrow, just in case. You're jolted awake by something cold and sharp colliding with your forehead. Turns out it's a child's foot. Specifically, the blacksmith's youngest, who decided in the middle of the night to crawl into your straw pile for warmth, and didn't think to mention it. You groan, gently remove the foot, and sit up, realizing two things instantly. 1, your back is not designed for shared bedding, and 2, childhood in the Middle Ages is nothing like the storybooks. Out here, childhood is short, practical, and often slightly damp. If you can walk, you can work. And if you can speak, someone's already telling you to fetch water, sweep ash, or keep the geese from staging a revolt. You watch as the village children spring into their routines. The older ones herd animals. The middle ones carry kindling. The youngest mostly just try to stay out of the way, which is harder than it sounds when pigs don't respect personal space and everyone's tossing buckets of water without warning. One boy chases a chicken for breakfast. Not to kill it, but to collect an egg, while dodging the wrath of an angry hen. It's like a medieval obstacle course. He wins, barely. You applaud quietly. Formal education, at least for most, is non-existent. There are no chalkboards or math quizzes here. The church might run a small school, but that's for the lucky, or the destined to be monks. Everyone else learns by doing. You don't study agriculture. You sow seeds, watch them grow, or not, and learn from the pain of failure. Literacy is rare, writing even rarer. If you can sign your name with an X, you're ahead of the curve. Despite this, the children are clever. They know which mushrooms to avoid, how to mend a shoe, and the quickest route to the best blackberries. One girl can identify birds by their call. Another carves whistles out of reeds that sound suspiciously like a scream. You see potential in them. A spark. Even if they never learn Latin. But childhood here is dangerous, too. Sickness can strike without warning. Fevers, infected cuts, or even something as simple as drinking tainted water can end a young life in days. Half the village graveyard is filled with tiny stones. And you notice that the older villagers avoid looking at them too long. Today, one boy slips while climbing the stack of firewood and cuts his hand. His mother wraps it with moss and cloth, muttering that she'll check on it later. There's no doctor, no stitches. Just hope. And a lot of washing with ale, because it's safer than water. Games do exist. Stick fights. Tag. Toss the rock at the other rock. You watch a group of children building a fortress out of mud and straw. It's impressively detailed, with battlements and a small gate. Then another group attacks with pine cones. Chaos. Joyful, muddy chaos. You ask one child what they want to be when they grow up. They blink. That's not a question people ask. They'll be what their parents are, or what the Reeve assigns. Dreams aren't career paths, they're bedtime stories. Still, the boy shrugs and says, maybe a shepherd. Or a thief. Thieves don't have to shovel much. You laugh, and he runs off grinning. Historians still argue whether medieval childhood was harsh and joyless or just different. Some accounts speak of constant labor and high mortality. Others show evidence of toys, lullabies, and moments of real affection. The truth probably lies somewhere in the mud, where children worked hard, but also played, laughed, and found wonder in even the smallest pleasures. Afternoon comes, and the village slows. The children who aren't napping are gathering herbs or helping stir dinner. One girl stirs a pot so forcefully you fear the spoon will vanish. The boy with the cut hand is fine, for now. He's already trying to sneak a second helping of turnip mash. That evening, you join a family for dinner. It's simple, barley porridge, a bit of cheese, a shared bowl of boiled greens, but there's laughter. The children argue about whose fart was louder during the prayer. The parents roll their eyes but smile. There's love here. Quiet, practical love. Before bed, you hear a lullaby, soft, lilting, in a language older than the village itself. It's about the stars and the foxes that guard them. The child being rocked is already asleep, one hand curled around a carved wooden doll that looks suspiciously like the goat. You return to your hut, lying down beside your own goat, who is now wearing a scrap of ribbon stolen from someone's hem. You think of your own childhood, if you had one, and realize that in this world, growing up means surviving. Quickly. But for a few years, if you're lucky, you chase chickens, eat berries, and believe that the stars are guarded by foxes. And that, you decide, might be enough. Your hut leaks. Again. It's not raining outside, but a steady drip from the ceiling above your straw bed has soaked through your blanket and is currently forming a puddle under your foot. You sigh, push the goat gently off your leg, and decide today is the day you're going to fix this house before it turns into a medieval indoor pond. Building a medieval home isn't glamorous. There are no toolkits, no blueprints, no helpful how-to videos. Just mud, sticks, and a vague hope that gravity won't betray you again. You step outside and examine your humble abode. It's a typical peasant house, wattle and daub walls, woven sticks covered in a hearty mix of mud, clay, and manure. The roof? Thatched straw, which looks charming from a distance but up close is home to more mice than you'd like to admit. Today's goal is twofold: patch the leak in the roof and reinforce the walls where a particularly ambitious pig tried to chew its way through last week. You begin by gathering materials. Straw from the barn, twigs for weaving, and a bucket of fresh daub, which is just a polite word for mud and animal dung. You mix it with your hands. It's cold, it's sticky, and yes, it smells like what it is. But it works. Somehow. The secret ingredient? Desperation. You climb onto a wobbly ladder fashioned from scrap wood and hope the thatch holds. You wedge new bundles of straw into the gaps, packing them tightly and pressing them down with a wooden paddle. It's tricky work. The straw must overlap like scales to shed water, not just sit there like decorative hay. You sneeze 3 times. You're pretty sure something inside the thatch sneezes back. Next, wall repair. You kneel and reweave broken sections of wattle, long, flexible rods bent around vertical stakes. Then you slap on fresh daub like you're icing the world's least appetizing cake. The texture is unique. Thick. Gritty. Warm in a way that makes you uncomfortable. But as it sets, it seals the gaps and strengthens the frame. You step back and nod. Not bad for someone who's barely awake and covered in compost paste. Inside, the house is 1 room. Maybe 2, if you've done well. There's a hearth in the center, a few wooden pegs for hanging herbs, and your sleeping area, straw on a wooden frame, if you're lucky. The goat sleeps in the corner, next to the turnip storage. Everyone shares the space. No privacy. If someone snores, everyone knows. If someone lets one rip in their sleep, you pretend not to notice. You set about fixing the door, which creaks like an old man every time the wind blows. It's just a wooden slab, held together with pegs and determination. You adjust the hinges, pour a little pig fat into the squeaky parts, and voila, silence. Or something close to it. By midday, your arms ache, your hands are caked in earth, and your back has lodged an official complaint. But your hut no longer leaks. Probably. You sit back and admire your work, feeling a surge of pride. Then the neighbor's dog runs by and knocks over the new support beam you placed by the entrance. You sigh. Deeply. The goat bleats in sympathy. Historians still debate how skilled peasants were at construction. Some argue that the average villager had a wide range of practical knowledge, how to build, repair, and even improvise entire homes using local resources. Others believe villages relied heavily on specialists like thatchers or wattle workers. But you've definitely just become your own contractor. In the afternoon, you help your neighbor apply lime wash, a thin coating of slaked lime over the daub to protect it from rain and add a little charm. It gives the walls a pale, chalky look, which says functional but fabulous. You get some in your eye. It stings. You swear gently and rinse with weak ale. You patch the chimney next. Not with bricks, of course, but with stones and mud. It leans slightly now. You choose to call it rustic. The sun begins to set, casting golden light through the repaired doorway. A breeze flows through your home, not as a draft, but as actual airflow. It's cozy. For the first time in weeks, you feel like this tiny hut might stand a full season without collapsing. Maybe even 2. You prepare dinner on your hearth, barley stew with a few wild greens you foraged. It's hot, comforting, and, miraculously, not dripping onto your head from the ceiling. The goat settles down. You hang your damp tunic near the fire. And you sit back, staring at the walls you rebuilt, the roof you thatched, and the tiny space that, against all odds, still stands. Your home may be made of sticks and dung, but it's yours. Every patched beam, every drafty corner, every creaky floorboard tells a story. Of survival. Of effort. Of stubbornness. And as the fire crackles and the stars peek through your smoke hole, you smile. Because in this medieval life, home isn't where the heart is. It's where the roof doesn't leak. You wake up feeling suspiciously refreshed, which is unusual. The fire's still warm, no one yelled for you to feed the chickens before sunrise, and even the goat is still asleep. You should know by now that this peace means only one thing: something is definitely about to go wrong. Sure enough, there's a commotion near the village square. You shuffle over, still tying your belt, and see it: someone's already in the stocks. Head and hands locked through wooden holes, posture bent at an unfortunate angle, with a group of amused villagers tossing handfuls of wet straw at his face. It's Gregory the Cooper. You blink. He's usually the boring one. What'd he do? You ask the blacksmith's apprentice, who's grinning far too wide for this early. Cut corners on a barrel for the Lord, she says. Leaked all over the floor. Now he's got a soggy tunic and a week's worth of sore knees. But justice, medieval style. Punishment in your world isn't private or subtle. It's public, loud, and meant to leave an impression. Forget courtrooms and appeals. Here, if you mess up, everyone knows. And often, they get to help enforce the consequences. The stocks are the most common punishment for petty crimes: stealing, gossiping, cheating at dice, even singing lewd songs during Mass, which, to be fair, was catchy. You've seen them used more times than you can count. They're made of thick timber, often set near the busiest part of the village. Not for comfort, but maximum visibility. You pass them every day, a grim reminder to stay on the Reeves' good side. Today, the punishment is playful-ish. Straw, maybe the occasional soft clod of mud. But some days, it gets rougher. Rotten vegetables. Hard bread. Once, someone hurled a dead squirrel. That escalated quickly. But stocks are only one flavor of punishment. For worse crimes, like refusing to pay taxes, harming livestock, or disrespecting the church, there's the pillory. Similar to stocks, but elevated. Designed for spit-level humiliation. You've seen strong men cry after an hour in one, not from pain, but from the endless barrage of jeers and flying cabbages. If the crime is more serious, it might earn a beating. The Reeves staff isn't just for pointing. It's for enforcing. And it doesn't take much provocation to find yourself bent over a barrel, getting a lecture punctuated by smacks. You're careful to stay well away from the Reeve when he looks particularly philosophical. Then there's the ducking stool, used mostly on women accused of quarreling, which really means being loud, smart, or unmarried past 20. It's a chair on a seesaw, dunked into the river until the offender is suitably drenched and humbled. Humiliation meets pneumonia. You've also heard tales of more elaborate punishments: branding, mutilation, exile. But those are rare, and usually reserved for people who've managed to offend someone rich. Or really unlucky sheep thieves. Historians debate whether medieval punishments were truly barbaric or just public deterrents in a world without prisons. Some argue the communal aspect made justice more immediate and visible. Others point out the lack of consistency, mercy, or proportionality. You just know you'd rather muck out the pigpen than ever see the inside of the pillory. You spot Agnes the spinner nearby, whispering that she saw Gregory take 2 apple cores from the compost pile last week. He's always been a rebel, she adds with mock seriousness. You chuckle and help her carry her basket. Rumors like these fly fastest when someone's in the stocks. The villagers see it as theatre, and today, the drama is free. But punishment isn't always physical. Sometimes it's social. Being shunned, ignored, or blamed for things mysteriously going wrong, like a fire that started with no witnesses, or a well that suddenly tastes funny. Superstition ties closely into punishment. Accusations of witchcraft, while not always fatal, can ruin a reputation and get you thrown out of the village faster than you can say crooked herbs. You recall last year's scandal. A man blamed for eyeing the milkmaid too hard was found guilty of souring butter with impure thoughts. He had to walk barefoot through nettles and swear on 3 relics that his heart was pure. The milkmaid? She married the brewer and now has her own butter churn. Happy endings, sort of. As the sun rises higher, Gregory is released. His joints crack as he straightens, face red but smiling faintly. Could have been worse, he mutters. At least they skipped the fish guts this time. The crowd disperses, some already speculating about who might be next. You head back to your hut, a little warier of your own behavior. No borrowing tools without asking. No cursing at the priest's mule. And definitely no whistling during Vespers. Because in the medieval village, punishment isn't just about pain. It's about memory. Everyone sees it. Everyone remembers it. And if you're smart, you'll stay on the right side of the law, and out of arm's reach of a rotten cabbage. You're stirring your morning porridge, half asleep, when someone coughs behind you, a deep, ragged, chest-shaking sound that doesn't belong to anyone in your hut. You turn slowly. It's the Reeves brother, red-eyed and drenched in sweat. He sways on his feet. Then, with alarming grace, he collapses into your firewood pile. Your first thought? That's going to leave a bruise. Your second? He's sick. Really sick. By midday, 3 more villagers are coughing. The blacksmith's son, the old spinner, and the baker's apprentice. All feverish, all mumbling nonsense, all with the same telltale swellings on their neck and underarms, angry, purple lumps that pulse with heat and dread. You've heard rumors from the next town over. Talk of a sickness so fast and fierce it steals people before the second rooster crows. They call it the pestilence, the great death, the black sickness. You call it something else entirely, terrifying. Word spreads faster than the illness itself. The priest rings the church bell non-stop. Some villagers gather in the square to pray. Others flee into the woods. One man just walks into the pond and refuses to come out. Panic, thick and sour, grips the village. You try to stay calm, but the signs are all there. The swelling. The delirium. The sudden, wrenching deaths. One by one, people drop. No time to whisper last words, no time to gather loved ones. They're simply here one day, gone the next. You move carefully, covering your mouth with a cloth soaked in vinegar. The wise woman recommends sage, garlic, and burning juniper. She hands out bundles and chants over them. You light yours in your doorway, the smoke thick and bitter. You hope it works. Hope, here, is medicinal. Others turn to prayer, piling into the church for hours at a time, kneeling on cold stone, begging for deliverance. The priest offers absolution, but even he looks pale. No one wants to touch the sick. The bravest leave food outside the doors and run. The dead? Burials are fast, shallow, and done by volunteers who've already made peace with the fact that they're next. The gravedigger doesn't sleep anymore. You help him dig one afternoon. By the end, your arms are jelly and your soul feels like a damp rag. Your goat seems immune. She stays close, warm and annoyingly healthy. You begin to think she might be divine. Historians still debate the exact cause and spread of the Black Death. Was it fleas? Airborne bacteria? A combination of poor hygiene and cruel luck? The truth is, medieval people didn't know. They blamed bad air, divine wrath, even strangers and outsiders. Anyone suspicious was suddenly guilty of something. In your village, people start pointing fingers. A newcomer is accused of bringing the plague. He's chased out with stones. The wise woman is spared, barely, only because she helped ease a child's fever the night before. You stay silent. Safer that way. You fall ill. It starts with a cough, then chills, then the lump under your arm. You sit alone in your hut, wrapped in every blanket you own, shaking so violently your teeth chatter. The goat lies beside you, unmoved. You whisper to no one in particular. Bargains. Apologies. A half-hearted promise to attend Mass every Sunday for the rest of your short life. Then, it breaks. You wake up the next morning alive. Sweaty. Exhausted. But alive. The lump is still there, but smaller. The fever's gone. You cry. Just a little. Quietly, so the goat doesn't judge you. Not everyone's so lucky. The blacksmith's son dies. The reeve's brother lingers but eventually recovers. The baker's apprentice, gone in 3 days. You help where you can. Boiling water, delivering herbs, burning soiled straw. Everything smells of smoke and vinegar. The church bell tolls almost constantly. At some point, it cracks. When the worst passes, what remains is silence. So many huts stand empty. The village is quieter, older, stretched thin. You gather in the square. Those who survived. Hollow-eyed but breathing. The priest speaks of divine mercy. The wise woman just nods and hands out more sage. You rebuild. You clean out the huts. You bury the dead. You thank the goat, just in case. Life doesn't pause for grief. It trudges on, muddy boots and all. That night, you sit by the fire, your chest still sore, your spirit scraped raw. You survived the plague. That's no small thing. You're marked by it now, scarred in ways no one can see. And as the wind howls outside and the embers glow softly, you whisper a thank you to the silence. To the herbs. To luck. Or maybe to the stubbornness that refuses to let you go just yet. You wake with the strange sensation that no one is yelling at you, and nothing's on fire. That can only mean one thing in a medieval village: it's going to get weird. Sure enough, there's a knock at your door. It's Brother Edwin, the monk from the nearby priory. He smiles like he's been chewing mint leaves and says, "Have you ever considered a life of contemplation?" You blink, still clutching your blanket. "I just survived a plague," you mumble. "Yes, well," he says, "that's often how it starts." And so you're invited to experience a day as a monk. You walk the 2 miles to the priory, through woods that smell of moss and old secrets. The building itself rises like a stone hymn, cool and silent, surrounded by herb gardens and cloaked in birdsong. Inside, everything is orderly, quiet, and smells faintly of beeswax, old parchment, and possibly something fermented in a jar by accident. Brother Edwin hands you a robe, coarse wool, the color of dusty humility, and leads you to the chapel for matins. It's just before sunrise, and you're trying very hard not to fall asleep on a pew. The chanting begins, deep, resonant voices echoing off stone walls. It's beautiful, mesmerizing. You drift into a near trance, only snapping awake when someone coughs next to you. Life in the priory runs on a tight schedule: prayer, work, study, more prayer, eating, silence, even more prayer, and sleep. No time for daydreaming, unless you're dreaming about how long until Vespers. You help in the scriptorium next. It's quieter than the graveyard and colder than your goat's stare when you're late with breakfast. Monks lean over illuminated manuscripts, copying texts with painstaking precision. You're given a quill and a sample page. Your handwriting looks like someone spilled ink during an earthquake. Brother Edwin kindly takes it away before it causes offense to St. Augustine. You move to the garden. Monks here grow everything: lavender for headaches, yarrow for wounds, and something called monk's pepper for unwanted urges. You don't ask. You just weed. At mealtime, everyone eats in silence while one monk reads from scripture. The food is basic: lentils, bread, broth, but fresh, clean, almost elegant in its simplicity. You try not to slurp. The rest of the afternoon involves more prayer, sweeping, and a deeply philosophical debate about whether snails have souls. You nod thoughtfully and try not to mention you once stepped on one barefoot. Monastic life is built around ora et labora, pray and work. It's structured, peaceful, and surprisingly strict. You're not allowed to talk during meals, during chores, or basically any time someone important is within earshot. You accidentally whistle once and receive a disapproving glance so powerful it could sand wood. By evening, you feel different. Calmer. Maybe it's the chanting. Maybe it's the lack of screaming pigs. Or maybe it's just that your robe doesn't itch as much anymore. Monks are not the only option for a life apart. Nuns lead similar lives in convents, often more disciplined, often with better cheese. Hermits live alone in huts or caves, surviving on donated food and intense eye contact with God. Some become anchoresses, sealed into tiny rooms with only a slit for meals and prayer requests. The commitment is intense. You admire it from a safe, unsealed distance. Historians still puzzle over what drew people to the cloistered life. Was it devotion? A lack of options? A desire for peace in a world that offered very little of it? Likely a mix. Monasteries provided food, education, and protection. And for many, a purpose that stretched beyond survival. Back in the village that evening, you feel lighter. Clean, in a way that isn't just about dirt. Your neighbors notice. One asks if you joined the priesthood. Another accuses you of smelling like a rosemary candle. You laugh. You tell them no, not yet. But for a day, you glimpsed a life shaped by silence, song, and script. You return to your straw bed, goat already snoring beside you, and close your eyes with the image of stone arches and golden pages still glowing behind your eyelids. Maybe monastic life isn't for you full time. But it's nice to know that, even in this muddy, chaotic, plague-prone world, there's a quiet corner where people believe in something bigger than themselves. And they have excellent gardens. You're tending your fire one quiet morning, minding your own soot-covered business, when a breathless boy bursts through the village path shouting, "Relic cart! Relic cart!" You blink. Did he say relic? As in the bone of a saint? The finger of a martyr? The toenail of someone who once stood near a bishop? Excellent. You throw on your least damp cloak and follow the excited crowd toward the square. And there it is, a wooden cart, garlanded with wilted flowers, pulled by a donkey that looks completely over it. Atop the cart sits a chest, velvet draped and gold trimmed, guarded by a sleeper-looking monk and a woman who might be a nun or just very good at looking holy. They announce, with great flair, that they carry the actual rib of Saint Ethelberga. Yes, the Ethelberga, the one who supposedly healed 37 cows and caused an enemy army to forget how to tie their shoes. It's a big deal. Relics are kind of a medieval obsession. They're sacred physical remnants of saints and holy people, bones, teeth, bits of clothing, sometimes even entire mummified hands. They're believed to have healing powers, grant divine favor, or at the very least, bless your harvest if you leave an offering. You line up with the others, clutching a coin and a sprig of something that smells like hope. The monk opens the chest, revealing a small bone fragment nestled in red silk. You stare at it. It looks suspiciously like a chicken bone. But no one questions it. You kneel, you pray, you touch the silk. You feel something. Reverence? Peer pressure? Hard to say. The nun sprinkles everyone with holy water from a jar that smells vaguely minty. For health, prosperity, and plague prevention, she says with a smile that has definitely been rehearsed. Nearby, a blind man claims his vision's been restored after touching the relic. People gasp. His cousin reminds him he wasn't blind to begin with. The monk clears his throat and changes the subject. You purchase a relic badge, a pewter charm shaped like the saint's symbol, stamped with the words Ethelberga Protect US. You pin it to your tunic. You feel at least 8% holier. Relic culture is big business. Churches with famous relics draw pilgrims. Pilgrims bring offerings, coin, and prestige. Towns compete over who has the real tooth of St. George. Some places claim multiple heads of the same saint. It's less about anatomical accuracy and more about spiritual marketing. You visit the church again that evening, where the priest is showing off the parish's own relic, a splinter said to be from the true cross. He keeps it in a box lined with velvet and guarded by a very judgmental cat. You ask politely if you can look. He agrees, after you help him carry some hay bales. He opens the box with a flourish. The splinter glows in the candlelight. You're pretty sure it's just a twig. But you kneel anyway. Everyone kneels. Historians debate the authenticity of most relics. Some were likely fabricated, others misidentified. But that wasn't the point. Relics offered hope, connection, and a tangible link to the divine in a world where death was always around the corner. Back at the village, you hear about other miraculous items. A woman claims her boiled egg was blessed and now never goes bad. A man says he touched a saint's sandal and hasn't had a headache in weeks. Someone else swears a donkey bowed in the presence of a relic cart. You nod, impressed and skeptical. but mostly impressed. Relics inspire rituals too. There's a procession next week where people will march in a circle with candles and chant for good harvests. You volunteer, mostly for the free bread at the end. You practice your chant, Sancta Ethelberga, Ora pro nobis. Your Latin sounds like you're ordering soup, but it works. That night, you hang your relic badge near the hearth, just in case. You figure a little extra divine protection can't hurt. You rub your sore knee, whisper a quick prayer, and thank Ethelberga, authentic or not, for visiting your humble, muddy village. Because in a world of plagues, crop failures, and sudden duck-related accidents, having a saint on your side, even one made of chicken bone, is oddly comforting. You fall asleep imagining what relics the future might hold. Perhaps your wooden spoon, hallowed by 1,000 porridges. Or your cloak, eternally damp, yet miraculously mildew-free. Stranger things have been worshipped. You wake to the sound of bells, not the tolling of death or the call to confession, but bright, sharp peals cutting through the morning fog. Church bells, festival bells, celebration bells. It's Midsummer Day. The whole village hums with excitement, even the mud seems slightly less sticky. Midsummer is one of the biggest days in the calendar, halfway between the sowing and the harvest. A day when work pauses, music plays, and for a few shining hours, everyone pretends life isn't one long battle with dirt and famine. You step outside into a village transformed. The main square is strung with wildflowers and rushes. Ribbons flutter from the maple like sleepy streamers. Even the reeve is wearing shoes that match. A miracle in itself. Children run wild with garlands on their heads. The alewife is already ladling out her strongest brew. Somewhere, someone's trying to tune a lute using only optimism. And you? You've been assigned to help prepare the midsummer fire. You join a small group hauling logs and kindling to the center of the field. It's tradition. The bonfire symbolizes purification and protection, light driving back the darkness. Or possibly just an excuse to burn something huge. Either way, you're all for it. As the fire is stacked, dancers warm up near the maypole. The steps are simple: weave in and out, tie the ribbons, don't fall. You join in. You trip twice, once on your own foot and once on a chicken. No one minds. That's part of the charm. The feast begins at midday. Bread, cheese, cold stew, apples, and even a pie filled with something vaguely fruity. You eat until your belt begs for mercy. Someone hands you a cup of honeyed ale. It's sweet, strong, and definitely encourages bad decision-making. Games follow. Sack races. Wrestling matches. A competition to see who can balance an egg on a spoon while singing a hymn. The blacksmith wins by sheer volume. As the sun begins to dip, the fire is lit. It roars to life, casting flickering shadows and warm light across every soot-smeared face. You feel the heat on your cheeks, the crackle in your bones. Villagers cheer, laugh, and start leaping over the flames, a bold move said to bring luck. You watch. Then you try. You make it. Barely. You singe your tunic. Totally worth it. The evening mellows into storytelling. An old man speaks of a time when midsummer bonfires were used to ward off dragons. A young girl insists she saw a fairy near the woods. Someone jokes that the goat's been whispering secrets to the priest. You snort ale through your nose. Then the songs begin. Low, slow, rhythmic. Not loud or rowdy, but soft and winding, like the smoke curling up to the stars. You lie back in the grass, staring at the sky, thinking about all the days you've lived here. The mud, the meals, the misery and laughter, the work, the wait, the moments like this. Historians note that seasonal festivals like Midsummer were essential to medieval morale. More than just pagan leftovers, they offered connection between people, between past and future, between earth and something just out of reach. You sit with the quiet, the music, the smell of smoke and flowers. A rare stillness settles into your bones. As the fire crackles and the stars stretch overhead, someone begins to chant an old blessing. May your hearth be warm, may your grain grow tall, may your roof keep rain and sorrow small, and you believe it. Because you're still here. Still surviving. Still part of something older than fear. Now, the fire has faded to glowing coals, and the last voices are murmurs, soft and slurred with sleep. The village rests, bellies full, bodies aching, hearts eased for just a while. You curl beneath your cloak, the damp earth below you warm from where others sat, and the stars above whisper faint stories through the dark. There's no sound now but crickets, the gentle sigh of a breeze through the trees, and the slow breath of your goat somewhere nearby, curled against the wall of your hut. The world slows. The pain, the struggle, the aching hunger and cold, none of it matters tonight. Not in this glow, not in this stillness. Just the simple rhythm of life, breath in, breath out. Fire crackling. Shadows dancing. You did it. You lived this life. This wild, muddy, relentless, beautiful, impossible life. You tasted it all, the barley, the sweat, the laughter, the dirt. And you're still here. So sleep now. Let the dark fold gently over you like a blanket well worn. Let your limbs melt into straw and soil. Let your dreams carry you to other fires, other stories. You've earned your rest.